let's begin. I am filming hours later in the night than I normally do. I am woefully underprepared. I have so little to say. So this is just going to be a very casual November wrap up. Let November 2021 be forever immortalized as the month that I just forgot to read. I forgot to read. I forgot how to read. I just didn't read, basically. So every single year this happens, that in the last couple months of the year, my reading either completely takes off or I just barely read anything. So I went back in the archives. In 2018, November 2018, I read 13 books. 2019, I read 5. Last year, I read 9. This year, I read 3. I just did not feel like it for most of the month. The last week or so of the month, I started I should pick up a book. Yeah, I just read 3 books, all audiobooks. I just could not force myself to sit down, phone or paper, and move my eyes across the page. It just wasn't going to happen. Without too much more pomp and circumstance, I'm just going to get into what I did manage to read, starting with a DNF. Now, I am pretty lucky that I do not DNF books super frequently. It's not that I don't want to. I am pretty content, pretty at peace with when I read a book and it's not working and it's not gonna work, I'll just stop reading it. I didn't used to be that way, but in the last few years, I've become very protective of my reading and very liberal with my DNFing. Most of the time when I do DNF a book, I'm less than 10% of the way through, so it's literally not even worth commenting on or telling anyone that I DNF'd it, because a lot of times the problem is not the book, the problem is me and the timing of it. But I think the reason that I am generally very okay DNFing, but I don't do it super often, is I've just gotten pretty good at picking books that I'm gonna at least find a purpose in finishing. But if I am gonna DNF, I'm gonna DNF early. I'm gonna get out early. The book I did DNF was Outlawed by Anna North. I did not DNF this because I disliked it. I liked it. It just felt like I was not making much progress on it. I had it checked out through my library on Libby, and I took the full 2 weeks, and I had read less than half of it. And I just wasn't grabbed enough to try to blitz through the second half of it in a day. I also didn't want to burn up one of my 10 precious library holds on the ebook again for several months, because it took me a really long time to get the ebook. So I did spend almost 2 full weeks reading a book that I did not end up finishing, which I think is a contributing factor to why I only finished 3 books this month. And one more thing before I get into the books, I did read a short story that feels mention-worthy. The short story was The History of Sound by Ben Shattuck. It was available online. I'll see if I can find the link and put it in the description. If it's not there, then I didn't find it. So at the end of October, I believe it was announced that this short story was getting a feature film adaptation starring Josh O'Connor and Paul Mescal. And I was like, you're saying a lot of words that are really good together. I could not believe my eyes. I could not believe my good luck. The History of Sound tells the story of 2 young men during the World War I era who travel around the rural US making recordings of folk music. And obviously they have a relationship while they are doing this. I love this. I was very immersed in it. I was very captivated by it. It was very emotional, and I really emotionally connected with it, which is not usually the case with me with short stories. A lot of times, even shorter novels, if they're too short, I just feel like I don't have enough time to live in the story, to connect with the characters, to really get what's going on with them internally. But that was not the case with this. This was really beautiful. I thought it was really great. I read it in, a few minutes, basically. But yeah, it really it hit me right here, which I was not expecting. I was expecting to like it, because of all of the components to it that are just like things that I like. But yeah, I was really impressed by that. It just kind of like poured gasoline on my anticipation for this movie that will probably not come about for several years at least. Okay, now the books. The first book that I fully read and finished in the month of November was Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I listened to the audiobook on Libby in anticipation of the Apple TV Plus series that is now out and I still have not watched. It stars Jared Harris and Lee Pace and like a ton of other people. I've been on a little bit of a sci-fi kick, and in the last couple of years I've had pretty decent success with more classic sci-fi. So between that and the Apple TV Plus series coming out, and this summer I was thrifting in my mom's hometown in rural Western Iowa, and I found this very cool little box set of the Foundation trilogy, which is Foundation, Second Foundation, and Foundation and Empire, which are the first 3 books. There's like an odd amount of books. But anyways, but this book was something. If you thought Dune was cold and overcomplicated and emotionally distant, do I have something way more that? The basic premise is there is a scientist named Harry Seldon who has mastered what is called psychohistory, which is using like math and like psychology to predict the whole course of human history, all of humanity's future. And it's not looking good. So he starts the Foundation. And basically their mission is to create the Encyclopedia Galactica, I believe it is called, which is an encyclopedia that just contains the sum of all human knowledge. So when, humanity as we know it falls, when they come back, they don't have to go through 30,000 more years of history to get where we are now. They have a head start. But this is so much more than just that, but that's the jacket copy that we're dealing with. Part of what drew me to this is that Foundation is kind of regarded as one of those like unfilmable books. So was Dune. I'm sorry to keep comparing it to Dune. It's a very natural comparison for me. But like Dune was supposed to be unfilmable, but when I was reading that for the first time, I was like, this feels very cinematic. I can picture this all perfectly in my head. Unfilmable, my ass. Nothing's unfilmable. Now, having said that, I have no clue how they are endeavoring to make a TV show out of this. Like I said, I haven't started the show yet. I wanted to rewatch Pushing Daisies before I watched Lee Pace in this, and I just finished that yesterday. So my assumption is that some liberties are going to be taken with the show, because how would you adapt this to a TV show? I just don't understand. A major component of that is that the time scale in this book is completely bonkers. So as you can see, it's not a big book. Like, yeah, it's a little mass market, it's got little text, but it's not big. This book covers like over 150 years of time scale in this book, and there's more. So, you're reading a chapter and then the next chapter starts 30 years down the line. And a lot of times it's totally different characters. They're referencing all the same stuff, but it's just like a lot of time has elapsed and you're basically spending the whole book trying to catch up with what the hell everyone's talking about. Another reason this doesn't like scream television to me is that a lot of the scenes in this are not particularly cinematic, so to speak. So these very big picture, like political, religious, scientific things at play, but the scenes are like 3 or 4 guys in a boardroom talking about all this other stuff that's happening outside of the room. So it does much more read like just as vignettes across history. Also worth noting, it's minor. I know this book was published in 1951. But there are like effectively no women in this book. It's almost like it almost feels like a joke a couple times because they talk about like, well, how many people do you have? Well, I have this many people. No way you have that many people. How many men do you have? Like, just like very old timey. You just kind of gotta roll with it. But because of all of this, because of the very complicated plot, the huge leaps in time, the major gaps in knowledge, I did find this pretty hard to follow. After the first like 2 or 3 jumps forward in time, I was pretty lost, especially listening to the audiobook. It was like, you're just making noise in my ear at this point. I don't know if I'm interested in continuing the series. If I did, we'll see how I do with the TV show. And if I'm like totally enamored with it, I'll give this series another whack. But I'd probably have to like do some rereading, do some like supplementary reading, find some explainers online or something, because this was like, this is so much. Good. It was cool. It's the amount of imagination and planning and thought that goes into something like this. Like, this is truly, in the most literal sense of the word, an epic. But boy, howdy, was this a challenge. Also, there's a character named Weenus. I don't know if that's helpful or not. There was some silly names in here. The second book I finished, I have significantly less to say about it because I just liked it. And that is Noor by Nnedi Okorafor. I had the audio arc from NetGalley. I think it came out last month. So thank you to NetGalley for letting me listen to that. That was a really great audiobook. So this book takes place in a not too far distant Nigeria. We have a protagonist named Ayo. A significant part of her body due to how she was born, and then further down the line she got in a really bad accident. So due to all of that, she has a solid amount of her body is cybernetic parts, arms, legs. And because of these cybernetic body parts, she is treated very differently. Really, she's treated very poorly because of this difference by the people in her community. And one day she's at the market and these guys are harassing her, and then they kind of attack her, and then she attacks them back. So all hell kind of breaks loose, and then she has to go on the run, and she has to like set out into the wilderness on her own and be in hiding. And that's kind of where the plot really begins, is where she sets out on her own. It's so stressful to read. Like I said, I don't have too much to say about this book because it did just come out, and beyond that inciting incident, kind of talking about it at all would be spoiling stuff in it. Actually, the real strength of this book lies in its world building. This is very, very cool. It's this kind of like grimly realistic version of the very easily imaginable near future. There's this one company called Ultimate Corp that kind of owns and runs everything. There's also major comments about like bodily autonomy and surveillance. There's a lot to be said about surveillance in this book. Very cool. It was a pretty quick read. And there is little room to wonder what Nnedi Okorafor thinks of Amazon. A couple years ago, I read the first Binti book. I mentioned in my series I want to read or books I want to reread video that I bought this bind up, and I just want to like finally finish reading the Binti trilogy. This kind of lit a fire under my ass because I forgot how cool Nnedi Okorafor's writing is. Very cool Afrofuturist sci-fi. Very fun. The third and final book that I finished this month was amazing. Oh my god. It was The Binding by Bridget Collins. Dude. I did see it recommended on TikTok. Stop. My going pace right now is about 1 TikTok book a month for the last couple months, I'm pretty sure. I forget the context. I think it had something to do with unreliable narrators or queer historical fiction or something like that, to kind of pitch this book to you. It's a weird pitch. Stick with me. So this is like a fantasy version of 19th century England where books are like people's memories. So they are memories that have been taken from people's minds by bookbinders. That's what bookbinders do. And in this fantasy world, bookbinders are regarded as like witches. They're not very popular or trusted in society. It's all kind of seedy. I absolutely loved this. The beginning was weird to get into sync with. It was kind of difficult, I'm not gonna lie. I went into this not really knowing the plot, not really knowing the pitch of it. I literally just started reading it. I did not understand that a major component of this book is people having their memories messed with. But let me tell you, this was the kind of book that I could not stop thinking about when I wasn't reading it. Like when it came time to set it down and do something else, I was really loath to do that. I would listen to the audiobook on Libby, so I'd be listening to it in my car. You know, I take the long way home because I just want to not stop listening to this book. I don't want to stop reading it. It feels like it's been a long time since I couldn't put a book down like this. And having said that, I do not want to tell you a single thing that happens in this book, because the exact timing and the manner that you as the reader find information out is so precise and so deliberate, and it's just so well done that I don't want to say anything really. There's this really cool, very overwhelming sense in you, the reader, and in the characters that it's like everyone here knows something that I don't. It makes you feel very confused at first, but then there's just like you kind of settle into this sense of unease and this sense of wonder, just like what is up. And then you and the characters find things out together, and you are just so in sync with their psyche and so in tune with their thoughts and their personalities that it hits you the same way it hits them. And there's also times when you, the reader, know things that the characters don't. And that is also very stressful. I think I spent the last third of this book just going like, just edge of my seat, like, oh, just so frustrating and so good. This was a 5-star read. This is one of the best books that I've read this year. This is one of the best books I've read in a really long time. I just loved it. I really want to read. She has, I think, one other book, just stupendous, and I really loved it. Those were the 3 books and 1 short story and 1 DNF that I read this month. Sorry I don't have more to say about these. This blew my mind, this was cool, and I don't want to say any words about this book. This whole video could be boiled down to those 3 things. Also, I changed my bookshelves again after I made such a stink about explaining that in the last video. If you see any errors in my alphabetization, no you don't. Keep it to yourself. That is all I have. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!